on this one fire, and I ended up coming down through the edge of a big flat at skewed angles, and I landed on one of those. Now my ankle had started to swell up, so that was the worst that ever happened to me. It's nothing, not as bad as what happened at home.
Okay, Dave, do you want to give us your name?
Sure. I'm Dave Jobe. I jumped out of McCall, Idaho from 1969 was my mid-year, and 1971 was the last year. I went into the Army following that.
What's your date of birth?
Born in November of 47, November 21st.
And do you know that you're being video recorded?
I do now.
Okay. Do you want to tell us where you were born and raised?
Born in Moscow, Idaho. Raised there for 13 years, and then down to Idaho Falls. Graduated from high school there. Started my trip with the Forest Service at that point.
So you started where in the Forest Service?
Started on the Targhee National Forest, up in Island Park, spraying mountain pine beetles, and the last half of the summer I was a swamper for a slash cap. When I trimmed off the piles to clean them up.
And when did you first see or think about smoke jumpers?
That first year that I was working for the Forest Service, there was about a half a dozen jumpers that had been sent over because it was a slow year, at least in the beginning, for fires. And they came over to cruise the timber, so those of us that were spraying for the mountain pine beetles would know what trees we're supposed to spray.
Did they come out of West Yellowstone or out of Missoula, or where'd they come out?
No, they were all out of McCall.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
So, so you took an interest in smoke jumping then.
Yeah, well, they always had folding green.
Money, huh?
Money, and it sounded like a lot of fun. Lot nicer than pumping on a piss pump so some guy can shoot ethylene dibromide and diesel fuel mixture up a tree with a 15-foot steel rod.
Did all your friends feel the same way about smoke jumping?
Oh, heavens no. A lot of the guys thought it was crazy, and it wasn't worth the money, too much of a risk. And the truth of the matter was, at that time, to the best of my knowledge, there had never been a smoke jumper killed as a result of a jump. That's what we've been told when I went in.
So that was your first summer out of high school?
That was my first summer out of high school.
So then where'd you go to school? You went to college?
Yeah, I went to the University of Idaho in Moscow.
And what were you studying?
Forestry, strangely enough.
And your exposure to firefighting started when?
Started that first summer, 66, when I was working for the Targhee at Island Park. We got called, I think I told you earlier that we went to Boise for the first one. I think the first one we went on was down in California. They loaded us up in the DC-3 and flew us down there, and the Ontario airport, and before they were going to bus us out to the fire, they took us into a local store so we could get some pokey bait or whatever we needed. And there's this big old sign, absolutely no out-of-state checks, no exceptions. We saw that, and almost all of us stopped in our tracks, and there's a groan comes out, because where they don't give you much time to go down. The manager says, "What's the matter, guys?" And we pointed to the sign and said, "We wanted to get some things. We're all out of state." And he said, "You here to fight our fires?" We said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, if you're with the Forest Service fighting our fires, you can write a check for anything you want to." And to me, that was monumental. It says that people have a high enough opinion of the folks working for the Forest Service that they trust you to pony up to your word. And that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling. You don't find it. As an officer in the Army, I remember trying to get some maintenance pulled on my car and wanting to pay with an out-of-state check. And they wouldn't accept it because it was an out-of-state check. And I said, well, I'm in the Army. I'm an officer in the Army. You know, I guarantee that if I tried to bounce the check on you, all you'd have to do is say something and they would make sure I made it good. I said, but I'm not going to do that because it'd ruin any kind of career potential that I might have. So the guy said, I don't care. Officer in the Army, you're just like anybody else. You'd be a deadbeat. Totally different world that we're living in. That good feeling that I had when I was with the Forest Service versus what I got when I was a military man trying to get some. But that kind of digresses. It was a good feeling there, and then we went out and had good food, better food than I ate most days. Fresh fruit all the time there in California. It was good, hard work. But it opened my eyes to a lot of things.
Did that help you make up your mind to be going to forestry?
No. To be honest, the reason I went into forestry was a misunderstanding of sorts. I had been thinking that oceanography would be where I'd want to go. And if you would have told me when I was in high school that oceanography was under geology, I would have told you were on drugs. But that's exactly where it is, or was back then. I figured that oceanography should naturally fall under the Department of Forestry, which had the Department of Fisheries, or the College of Fisheries. It's a mistake, a stupid mistake. I didn't do enough research. But I got into forestry and I liked it. And then I find out from my folks that my grandfather used to be in forestry. He made a career of working for the Forest Service. And he was in one of the first movies they ever produced, showing how a ranger worked back there in the Black Hills.
So you were up, after that first year, you were back up in Moscow going to school for your first year.
Yeah.
And then what was your experience with fire after that? How many years?
Oh, I went back to the Targhee for my second summer, and I was on the recreation crew. We maintained campgrounds and trails, whatever needed to be done basically. And once again, when they called for help from the different districts around the place, we'd go on fires. That was the year we went down to Garden City in Boise. It was my second year, not my first. And I'm driving in there from the Boise airport, and I look up and here's this big old mushroom cloud. And the bus driver tells us, well, boys, that's where we're going. I said, man, we're going into ground zero where they dropped an atomic bomb. That was in the back of my mind. I was laughing about it, thinking that it's really what it looked like. But we get there, and they tell us we're going to be on the night crew. And so they issue us our lunch in a little cloth bag. We had one bologna sandwich. It was 2 pieces of dry white bread with a piece of bologna in between it. We got a can of grapefruit juice, and I think a small red delicious apple, and that was our lunch. And I said, I want to go back to California. But we get out there, they truck us up in the back of an old, I guess it was an Army Guard deuce and a half, drop us off at the bottom of the mountain and say, okay boys, you need to go up there. So we climbed the mountain. I'm guessing it was probably about 1,500 feet, maybe 2,000 feet vertical. We get up there and we just start to build fire line, and the fire boss turns around and tells us to run, get off the mountain. So everybody's scrambling down the hill, and we get down to where we started and turns around and looks up and he said, oh, It settled down. Everybody back up. Am I in the Army? But what had happened is it started to go up, and he thought it was going to be crowning and running us off the hill. So it was a good decision, but it was anecdotally very typical of Army mentality that everybody knows and jokes about. Heck of a way to start.